Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Southeastern 14 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Barry Allen joins me. Barry, we have finally got our 8 teams for Omaha. 3 teams from the SEC included, and Mississippi State really eliminated most of the drama pretty early in its win over Notre Dame on Monday night.
Yeah, I was a little concerned going into that game, the way they played Sunday, but the dude effect took over pretty quick Monday night. I think Notre Dame was overwhelmed Saturday. Obviously, the first game they were there. Never been in a situation like that before, an environment. A little overwhelmed Saturday. I think they settled down a little bit Sunday, but then they'd also never been in a game 3, winner take all. We're going to Omaha, SEC. As they say on the SEC network, SEC, by God, amen. They'd never been in a situation like that, and they got overwhelmed again last night. It really happened in the second inning. I think they threw 49 pitches. The inning was 40 minutes long. They used 4 pitchers, and Mississippi State scored 6 runs, hit a 3-run homer from Logan Tanner, and got a single from Cameron James. Maybe a little help defensively, 4 walks, and next thing you know, it's getting out of hand. But credit Notre Dame, they came back and made a game out of it. Nico Cavadas, the dude that's hit all the home runs for them this year for Notre Dame, he guessed right on a 3-1 fastball from Landon Sims and hit it out of the stadium. Fans were joking that it was rolling down Highway 82 as Notre Dame was leaving the ballpark last night. It was a massive shot, and then Cavadas came back up in the 9th inning, and they had to tie and run on deck. But Cavadas ended up batting with 2 on and 1 out, and grounded into a double play and ended the game.
Yeah, we had the Ole Miss Coke ball guy. Now we got the Mississippi State guy that got hit in the gut by the home run. Did you catch that?
He didn't, but I did. It nailed him right in the chest, stomach area. I mean, he's not, bless his heart, he's not paying any attention whatsoever, and he gets grilled with a Logan Tanner home run ball. I mean, imagine just sitting out there minding your own business, having your favorite adult beverage and, whatever, and all of a sudden, wham, and you're down on the ground. What was that? But he wasn't injured, thankfully, and they were kind enough, the ESPN, to show him again later in the game last night. And Dave Neal and Kyle Peterson talked about him and go, hey, he's still here. He took one off the grill, but he's still here. And they showed it hitting him, and then showed him standing there later in the game as Mississippi State was about to clinch a 3rd straight trip to Omaha. But yeah, you're going to sit at sit out there and sit in open spaces. You got to be really careful. I always tell people when I go to a baseball game, Annette's the nicest lady I know, and I want to sit behind her. So that way I don't have to always pay attention, and I've got some covering so you don't get hit. But yeah, that was pretty scary for a minute last night, but it looked like it turned out okay for him.
Yeah, I'm glad that didn't hit about 8 inches higher. But anyway, that was some amusement. Well, I'm going to ask you about this. I've had some concerns at times about State after Rowdy Jordan and Tanner Allen and Logan Tanner. I wasn't sure if they had enough bats. Luke Hancock has been good at some times, and Cameron James, though, won the MVP of the Starkville Regional. You got Brad Cumbest, who's been pretty good since they put him in the lineup. I'm looking at them now, and I'm starting to wonder if that lineup hasn't filled out and become what State really needs it to be. And I wasn't really sure about that a month ago.
Yeah, I had some issues with their lineup most of the season as well. And watching them the last weekend against Alabama, I saw them against Arkansas several times on TV, and, they didn't really look good. And, Doug Nikhazy, of course, Doug Nikhazy's an unfair judgment factor anyway, trying to judge somebody for Doug Nikhazy. But he easily handcuffed them in the middle game on Saturday. But they've got some pieces. I mean, you talk about Tanner Allen at Player of the Year, 392, and Rowdy Jordan at 326, and really among the regulars. And I know Cumbest has played more recently than not, but he doesn't have 100 at bats. They're the only two guys on this team that hit over 285. And you've got to really pitch when you don't have a whole lot of offense like that. I mean, now they have five guys with double-digit home runs, don't get me wrong. But, Logan Tanner only hits 284. Scotty DeBrule only hits 284. Cameron James at 278. Luke Hancock at 258. And then it really falls off. They were playing Kellum Clark in left field in the Alabama series, and he's only hitting 250. And Forsythe is their shortstop, and he's their shortstop, and that's why he's in there batting ninth. But he's only hitting 229. He's not an offensive threat, but he's not there to be an offensive threat. He's there because he's a wizard at shortstop. But, yeah, I mean, they've got 10 home runs from Hancock, Tanner, and Jordan, 11 from James, and 14 from Logan Tanner. That might scare you a little bit going to Omaha with a big ballpark like it is. And, I think they hit 2 home runs last night. Allen hit a solo, and Logan Tanner hit a 3-run homer last night. So, but they're good. They're doubles team too. You've got 16 doubles from Allen and 20 from Jordan and 11 from Tanner and 12 from James. And that may play well in Omaha too, but they're going to need some help from the bottom of the order. They're going to need a third starter out there. I don't think McLeod pitched particularly well Sunday against Notre Dame. I don't think Bednar pitched really well on Saturday. I don't think they got good starting pitching all weekend. I mean, Harding gave them 4 innings last night, but I think they felt pretty comfortable, and they got him out, and they wanted to try to get some guys some work. And then they knew that if they won, they weren't going to play till Sunday, so that was going to give Landon Sims an extra day of work. And Stone Simmons came in, the bullpen kind of faltered in the middle of the game, and then the 6th inning, they just said, well, we're done with this. And they turned it over to Landon Sims, probably knowing that he was going to have that extra day to get ready for Texas on Sunday. So some issues on offense for them, for them, but still a team that has a chance to make some noise when they get to Omaha.
Yeah, I think that Sims becomes their Kevin Kopps in Omaha because McLeod just hasn't been consistent. Bednar I trust. I really do. I've seen him enough, and everybody's going to have their moments where they're not great, but I trust him with the ball. But other than that, they don't have a third guy. Houston Harding was a kid who's kind of been a swing man for them. He's kind of their number 3 starter right now. Really, though, he's been used both ways, and he's not a 3 that you're going to throw probably for 6 innings. You're probably going to get 3 to 4 out of him. But you know what? In Omaha, the way that you have days between starts, that might be good enough for them. If Bednar's good, you might be able to go McLeod as long as he's effective, and then Harding and Sims in some order. And look, they've got other guys too. I'm not saying they don't, but this is truth serum. You see who coaches really trust and who they don't. And I just think that it's going to be interesting to see how they structure pitching once they get to TD Ameritrade.
Well, they open Sunday night, so they play the last game of the first round. So they have the luxury of watching 3 games, and 3 teams win and 3 teams lose before they start. Win or lose, they don't play again until Tuesday. And I believe if they win Tuesday, they don't play again until Thursday. The Monday winner, I believe, gets off Tuesday and Wednesday and doesn't play again till Thursday. So you're potentially looking at Bednar Sunday, McLeod Tuesday, perhaps Bednar again on Thursday. And if you win, then you don't play again till Monday. And then you got McLeod. But in the championship series, if they get 3 games, they're going to have a third guy. But you're also looking at Sims can go 2 innings Sunday, 2 innings Tuesday, 2 innings Thursday, and he hasn't pitched back-to-back days. And he will be a factor Saturday because, he made his debut this season against Texas. That was the first game that he pitched for Mississippi State. They brought him in the game in the 6th inning with the bases loaded and no one out. And Texas did not put a ball in play. strikeout, 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 inning over. He faced 12 batters against Texas. He retired all 12 batters, and 10 of them struck out. The Texas has seen him. They had not seen him in February. They have seen him. They now have video on him. They've experienced him. But that's a loud debut. When you enter the game in a major league stadium, you have never pitched in a college baseball game, and you enter the game in a major league stadium, and you are playing one of the icons of college baseball, Texas, and you go, you know what? That really wasn't that big of a. He didn't say that, but he retires all 12 with 10 strikeouts and strikes out the side with the bases loaded and gets out of the inning. That resonates, and he's been there. He's also faced Texas. He won't be intimidated. He's struck all these guys out back in February. Different teams, different situations. I understand that, but both teams will have an advantage of having seen him, and he's having seen the Texas lineup. But he will be a big factor in this College World Series for Mississippi State.
You know what's interesting about State? They have struck out 386 times all year, that being their hitters. That's the lowest in the league. By contrast, and State has played 61 games. Vanderbilt has played 60. Vanderbilt has struck out 559. Tennessee in 66 games has struck out 557. Like even Missouri, which stopped playing baseball 3 weeks ago, struck out 460 times. I do wonder. Now, State doesn't exactly crush the ball a lot of the time. So maybe, there's putting play with authority, which Vanderbilt and Tennessee certainly do. Not that State doesn't have some guys that do that as well. But, ballpark counts for a lot, as we've talked about. And I'm very interested to see how State's contact approach at a time where that's kind of out of vogue in baseball. And that's not to be critical of State. I'm just saying you don't see this as much anymore. It's going to be very interesting to see how that translates to Omaha.
Yeah, this park plays a lot different than everybody else's. It's a big ballpark. The home run sometimes comes out of play. You talk about Mississippi State strikeouts. I thought where you were going with that was you heard that on the telecast last night, like I did. Mississippi State, you mentioned 366. I think that's 66. My numbers are real small this morning.
86, but it's a low number. Yeah, it's the lowest in the league. So,
but you look at their pitching staff, and they've struck out almost twice as many hitters as Mississippi State hitters have struck out. They're in the 740s. Their pitching staff, and they're a strikeout staff, and Mississippi State is not a strikeout team. I guess any roundabout way, that's where I was going with that. But also in Omaha, what comes into play is you've got to manufacture runs, and this team only has 13 sacrifice bunts all year long, with Scotty DeBrule leading the way and Tanner Leggett leading the way with 4 apiece. So if you're in a situation, they're not going to strike out, but maybe the long ball is out of play in this park because of the weather or just because the park plays big. This is not a sacrifice bunt kind of team. They don't manufacture runs. They've walked 271 times, and they've been hit 67 times by pitches, but only 13 sacrifice bunts, and that could come into play in Omaha because that's the way you've got to try to generate some runs. And you're going to run into guys who can really pitch. They've seen that in this league. That's not going to be anything new to them, with good pitching. They've seen that for 10 weeks in the regular season in a tournament, an SEC tournament. They run into some really good arm every weekend, some 2 and some 3 times. But that would be one thing that would be good for them is they don't strike out. But the other thing is they don't manufacture runs very well with just the 13 sacrifice bunts, which may be something they have to do in Omaha to get some, put some runs on the board.
Anything else on State before I touch on a couple of other bracket-related things? And we will go into previews and stuff later in the week, so we're not going to let it all out at once. But obviously, fresh on our mind with State having been the last team to clinch to Omaha last night.
Yeah, I think, and we'll get into this, and we may have a surprise guest or two, to talk about this later on in the week. But I think the one thing for me is if you're a Mississippi State baseball fan, if you're a Mississippi State baseball alum, if you're a Mississippi State baseball player, the one thing that eats at you more than anything else is you've never won it. And I'm not saying this team. I'm not saying this team won't win it. I'm not saying this team will win it. But for the team that is 12 times to Omaha, that everybody sees on national TV, the immaculate stadium, and let me throw that out there. They drew 40,140 for 3 games in this super regional. They had more people, twice as many people watched the 3 games in the super regional as Notre Dame had watched them before they came to Starkville this year. Twice as many.
Wow.
And they set the all-time 3-game NCAA attendance record. They had the number 1 and the number 2 single game super regional attendance record. Last night they only had 11,000. Shame on y'all for not showing up last night. they only had 11,000. I was there several years ago when they played Clemson in a super regional. They played on Friday morning at 11 and Saturday morning at 11. And then at the time were the 2 largest super regional crowds ever, and there were 12 or 13,000. It was 509,000 degrees. It was so hot. Mark Neely and Buck Martinez did the game for ESPN, and I worked for them in that series. And there were people everywhere, and that record has now been broken this year by their super regional. So that place was incredible. But for a team that has all of that, and I'm not dissing on them at all, but for a team that has all of that, they've only won 1 SEC regular season championship since 1990. That's the same number as Kentucky. That's 1 less than Alabama. But they've somehow, some way, Omaha has always avoided them. And the one game that eats at them more than anything else is Texas. And here's their chance Friday or Sunday night to get to Texas. They had Texas on the ropes in 1985. They didn't win. They lost the next day on a walk-off grand slam by Greg Elena against Bobby Thigpen. And that they will tell you that team right there should have won the national championship. They felt like they had it in their grasp. They have not. They made it to the finals against UCLA a couple of years ago. No chance against Bauer and Cole. I mean, they had no shot. No one did. But the one thing for Mississippi State baseball that eats at them more than anything else is they have never been able to win the national championship in Omaha. And I think their team, I don't know that Lamonis and the team will have that. We'll talk about that and carry that pressure. But there's a lot of pressure to be that first Mississippi State team to get that done. And they've yet to do that. And that's a lot of pressure to take on a program that's steeped in tradition and history as they are. That one team like Florida State has just never been able to get over the hump. And I think they will feel. I think they feel that pressure. I think every team feels that pressure. We got to be that team, and I think they just need to go out there and play the best they can. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, someday it probably will for them. But this team with the pitching they have has certainly has to feel good about its chances.
Let's talk to the bracket for a minute. I've got a couple of thoughts here. And again, we're going to save some things for later in the week. But I look at this, I don't feel like there is a team that sort of slipped in there like you do sometimes. Sometimes a team just falls their way, and maybe they get a cake super regional where there's an upset somewhere else, catch a couple of breaks. I feel like this field in Omaha is really, really, really solid. I don't think that there's like just a pushover for anybody at any stretch.
No, you could say Texas had an easy ride. They beat 3 wins, came against 4 seeds, but it's not Texas' fault that Florida and Miami didn't get it done in Gainesville, and credit South Florida for winning that regional. And then they beat a 3 seed in Fairfield and a 2 seed in Arizona State. You could say that their ride was a little easier than most of these teams, just by simply who they played, the way it worked out for them. Not Texas' fault, because Texas is really good, and Texas got Ty Madden and a good offense, and they probably would have won probably any regional or super regional, no matter who they played. You look at Virginia, you picked them from the start, not only to win that regional, but you had them going to Omaha from the start. And, these cats are 6-0 in elimination games in the NCAA tournament. They lost their first game to South Carolina, came back, won 4 straight, beat Old Dominion twice, stayed in Columbia. They didn't go home. Played Dallas Baptist, lost on Saturday, endured a 4-hour rain delay, lost the game on Saturday, bounced back Sunday and bounced back yesterday and won the game. They've won 6 straight NCAA tournament games. They'd been in Columbia since June the 2nd. They came in on a Wednesday afternoon, 6-hour drive, 7-hour drive from Charlottesville. They were still in Columbia yesterday playing. And they'd kind of made Columbia their home, and they were true road warriors. They didn't go home between, they could have gone home for a day and a half, and Brian O'Connor was like, really doesn't make a lot of sense to get on a bus, go home, turn around the next day and come back. It makes 0 sense. So they just stayed, and they've been in Columbia, since June the 2nd. I think they went home last night and tried to get ready to go to Omaha. And then you look at Arizona and Stanford, who are in from the Pac-12. I mean, these are 2 powerful offenses. I mean, Arizona beat Ole Miss in 2, non-competitive games, and Stanford beat Texas Tech in 2 even more non-competitive games. I mean, they those 2 offenses really got it done. And Stanford had a 3 home run guy Sunday, had a complete game, 2-hitter. I mean, they totally dominated Texas Tech, who doesn't lose super regionals at home. And then you've got North Carolina State, who did the unthinkable, the improbable. The only team this year to win a series against Arkansas, and they go to Baum Stadium and beat the best team in the country and get to Omaha. And then you got Vanderbilt and Tennessee taking care of business at home, with Vanderbilt dominating on the mound and Tennessee hitting all the home runs. And Mississippi State getting it done last night in a Game 3 with Notre Dame. So I think you have a very balanced bracket, a very good World Series. I think it's very competitive. There's 102 combined World Series appearances between this field and 15 combined national championships between this field. Arizona's won 4, Texas won 6, Vanderbilt's got 2, Stanford's got 2, Virginia's got a national championship. Texas is in Omaha for the 37th time. 37 times they've been to Omaha. They expect to go. And so I think you got a really good field and a lot of history in Omaha, some really good matchups, and we'll get into those. But just, I'm anxious to see Arizona's offense against Rocker and Leiter. I'm anxious to see Texas and Mississippi State. Can Mississippi State reverse the 1985 curse against Texas? I think Stanford and NC State's going to be very intriguing. And I think Tennessee and Virginia in first round is going to be very intriguing, and see how that goes. So I think we've got some really good, fun, competitive games to talk about and watch in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think Vanderbilt has got an easier path to come out of its bracket than do either Mississippi State or Tennessee. I'm thinking as I'm watching Virginia, Dallas Baptist, from a Tennessee perspective, I'm thinking I really don't think Virginia is the team you want to see here, because A, it's got a stud that they'll face in game 1, and 2, there's pedigree. I mean, and this is the pedigree side of things. I mean, with Texas, State, Virginia all having been there, Virginia and Texas having won within recent memory, I just think that's a really tough combination. I don't think that the other side of the bracket is bad. I think that's a makes for some terrific matchups too. But I think the tougher side is that bracket that Tennessee and State are in.
Yeah, Texas, Tennessee, Mississippi State, and Virginia, all very legitimate teams. And Tennessee's going to have one thing working against them on Saturday that the other teams, until they play, won't. But Brian O'Connor is he's the godson of Omaha. He played at Creighton for Jim Hendry. He was on the Creighton team that went to the College World Series in 1991. He's from there. I think he's from Council Bluffs, Iowa, but he's got Omaha pedigree. He's a Creighton alum. Jim Hendry, everybody knows what he's done. And when he left Creighton, became the great scout for the Cubs and the Yankees and player development director in the major leagues, and, huge, baseball guy that he is. So Tennessee's got that going against them because they've got Omaha's favorite son coaching in the Virginia dugout. And I think the last time they were there when they played Vanderbilt, they showed his dad was there Father's Day weekend. And, it was a big deal to the O'Connors, and it's a big deal. I think Jim Hendry was actually there. I mean, it's a big deal to them. And he's got that Omaha pedigree that will help him. He's familiar with it. And matter of fact, Brian O'Connor is one of the players in the Omaha statue in front of TD Ameritrade Park. That's how connected he is to the College World Series. When they see those players in that statue, and if you go, take a picture of it, but Brian O'Connor is one of those guys. And so he is very connected to Omaha, very connected to the College World Series. Now, that don't mean anything on the line, on when they get between the lines, but the crowd can play a factor, and they pick their teams, but there will be a lot of Omaha people there that will support Virginia, and they've got a really good team. I mean, they've got good pitching, they got timely hitting, they got a kid in their lineup they compared to Kelly Leak from the Bad News Bears, kind of looks like him, and they got this crazy closer that comes in out of the bullpen with a full beard that eats gallons of Dippin' Dots ice cream every day, and he just comes in and just shoves it. And he didn't pitch in the Super Regional at all, but he threw like 90 pitches Tuesday to beat Old Dominion and get them into the Super Regionals. And they didn't use him in the Super Regionals. Maybe he's still fatigued, tired, and saving him for Omaha. But, they had other guys that came in. The Wyatt kid came in yesterday and shut it down. And so this is a good team. Tennessee's going to be challenged with a really good Virginia team. And, of course, Texas and Mississippi State, 49 combined Omaha appearances between these two guys. Be some real blue bloods on that side of the bracket.
Yeah, well, Tennessee, if we're going to stay on the Bad News Bears theme, they may face Amanda in game 1 and Andrew Abbott. We should do an all Bad News Bears Omaha team. I don't know who would be Tanner or Engelberg, but that might be some fun times.
It might be. They just compared him. They had a baseball card of Kelly Leak from the Bad News Bears, and at one angle they had of this kid batting. He's the one that hit the grand slam yesterday to win the game. And the one angle they had of him showing him at the plate, you could see a resemblance. So it was kind of fun. I mean, but this Virginia team was fun to watch. I mean, they were never out of the game, and 6 straight elimination game wins. If it's that's a real credit to their team and their coaching staff, and they've been there. They've been to Omaha, and they've won. And not only have they been there, but they won it, and they beat a good Vanderbilt team to win it. Lost to Vanderbilt the year before, and then beat Vanderbilt the next year. And they've been there. They have the pedigree, and they're a past champion in it, and they will certainly be a challenge for whoever they play in Omaha as long as they're there.
Am I the only person who has an actual Bad News Bears jersey?
Yes, I would think so. I mean, there could be others, but probably. I remember.
I think everybody needs one. Yes,
I agree.
The movie, the TV show, it was just great.
It was. I mean, Walter Matthau. It was great. I mean, it's one of the greatest movies, and it's a lot of fun. They got to go to the Astrodome, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some things in that movie that you couldn't make these days, but that's a topic for another time. Speaking of curveballs here, I got a text from a friend of the podcast last night. I'm just going to read this to you. And he says, should Super Regionals be on another field, on a neutral field? And I said, that no way, that's never going to happen. And he said, it'll be there in 3 years. Write it down. The money is there to take it out of town. It's the only low-level, non-revenue sports that give a big home field advantage to the higher seed. And he thinks there's more money there pouring into college baseball. And when you do that, you start going to more neutral environments. Of course, you see it in basketball. What are your thoughts on that? Do we see in the near future Super Regionals being moved out of team ballparks and into neutral sites?
I don't see that. I mean, I don't think we're there yet. We've had this discussion, some friends of mine and I before, talking about, somebody made the comment the other day, these softball Super Regionals, they're drawing 14,000 people in Oklahoma City. I wonder how many they could draw if they had neutral sites in the super regionals for softball. And I'm thinking, well, if Alabama and Kentucky played in softball in Tuscaloosa and had 4,000 or 5,000 every day, and they moved that to Chattanooga, maybe 500. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know that some of these places would draw. And you talk about baseball. I mean, you saw neutral site Dallas Baptist in Virginia. They had 1,400 people at a game. Here are the home attendance records for the super regionals. Mississippi State, 40,140. Arkansas, 33,252. That's 3 games for state. Texas had 2 games, 14,447. Arizona had 3 games, 18,428. Texas Tech had 9,464 for 2 games. Tennessee had 8,827 for 2 games. Vanderbilt had 77,083 for 2 games. And Columbia had 4,419 3 games. So the lowest one, obviously, was the neutral site. And I don't know how you would do the neutral sites. Would you say, okay, we're going to put one in Hoover at the Met? They have success there. But then if you don't get LSU, Mississippi State, or Ole Miss, are you going to draw? I mean, are people going to go to Hoover and watch a super regional between Dallas Baptist and North Carolina State? Probably not. If you had a super regional, neutral super regional, say at the new ballpark in Wichita, where this independent league team is playing in the American Association, a brand new park on the water there. If that's not Wichita State, Oklahoma, or Nebraska, are they going to draw? Probably not. And it's hard too. You get into that football. I don't want to be a fog here, a football only guy, and get into these football analogies, but it's hard. That's why there's not 5 or 6 rounds of playoffs in football, because it's just so hard for people to move around like that. People can't afford to go to a first round game at this bowl and a second round game and then the national championship game. I mean, it's just there's just not the money. It's expensive to do this. I mean, it's incredibly expensive. I mean, you talk about Alabama just in football. They play an SEC championship game, a semifinal, and a final. I mean, you talk about, and then they have a neutral site game every year, and then 4 road games. I mean, you're talking about Alabama fans, and there are a lot of friends of mine that are Alabama football fans that travel and go, but they go to 7 road football games every year, and it's expensive. I mean, so I don't know we're quite there yet. I mean, I think they've tried it in some areas. When teams didn't have ballparks to host, and they moved it to a minor league facility and different things like that. But I think maybe in the South it works more than it would in the Northeast, the Midwest, or California. I know there's been regionals in California where they've moved to minor league parks and, had no one there. And, they're talking about no one was at Arizona. Well, there was people in Arizona. It just wasn't what we're used to seeing here. But I don't know if we're quite ready for that just yet. But, could be someday, but maybe not right just yet.
Well, when I watched Virginia and Dallas Baptist, I just felt like there was a decided lack of atmosphere. After watching things in Arkansas, and I just feel like this time of the year with college baseball, it brings that college football and college basketball postseason excitement into the ballpark. And to me, and while I understand the point that my friend was making, I don't know. I just think you lose too much atmosphere. I just felt an electricity watching some of the other games and actually being at a couple this weekend that did not exist in Columbia.
No, it didn't. And that's not anybody's fault but the NCAA. That could have been fixed. Virginia or Dallas Baptist could have very easily hosted the super regional. One that's just, well, we picked our 20 sites and we got everybody ready, and they just didn't want to go do that again. And I don't know exactly what you have to do to clear everything, but I mean, at some point, I don't want to get on a political rant here, so maybe I just ought to be quiet. But at some point, we got to move on. Some point, you're just going to have to move on. and do it.
Well, let me
play.
interrupt you, Barry. Why are we still COVID testing at this point? I do not get it. Everybody either has the vaccine or does not want to take the vaccine for their own reasons. These players are not dying. They are, for the most part, not getting sick. The coaches are the ones who may be at risk, I would presume. They have taken care of business if they are. I do not understand why this is still dictating anything at this stage. 16, 17 months into this so-called pandemic, whatever we want to call it. I don't understand why this is still dictating anything at this stage. Help me make sense of that.
Political theater. I mean, I don't know.
I think that's the correct
I'll borrow
answer.
that line
Yes.
from a good friend of mine who shared that with me yesterday.
Who uttered it on the airwaves yesterday in Nashville, perhaps. Yes.
Who shall remain nameless, but I'm talking to him right now.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the media stuff that's going on for Omaha, we could talk about this again sometime too, but I mean, they're basically, the NCAA is basically telling Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Texas, we really don't want your media to come. They haven't come out and said that, but the first paragraph might as well just said, we don't want anybody to come. That's because they don't. And they're making it hard. They want everybody to cover the World Series virtually. I mean, there's no reason that Dallas Baptist or Virginia couldn't have hosted that super region. And South Carolina did an outstanding job. Ray Tanner and his staff, Kent Reichert in the media relations office, those guys at South Carolina went above and beyond to host a super regional. Took that on, hosted the regional as a 2 seed, took that on, and then helped Virginia stay there. I think Virginia worked out there. I think South Carolina washed all their laundry every day they were there, even personal stuff. I mean, South Carolina went above and beyond what they needed to do to make Virginia and Dallas Baptist feel comfortable there. And it's just a case where it's just, it's a long way from Dallas to Columbia, short turnaround. It's a pretty long drive from Charlottesville. I mean, it was 6 or 7 hours, by bus and car down to Columbia. If you went the first weekend and you stayed, you go, well, God, it's Tuesday afternoon. I got to go back to work. And I got to come back Friday, play Saturday. I can't come back next week because if I go to Omaha, I got to take 2 weeks off to go watch my kid in Omaha. And it's a burden on the parents and the families and the teams. And I don't know why that could not have been played in Charlottesville, why that could not have been played at Dallas Baptist. But South Carolina did a tremendous job. There's nothing negative about Founders Park, and so South Carolina did. That's all on the NCAA for just being, I guess, stubborn, lazy, didn't want to try to go do something at these parks and trying to get these teams to host. That would be my number one argument for neutral site. Well, you just had one and they had 1,400 people there. So that would be one of my arguments for people saying maybe we need to go to neutral site. That would be my argument against that. But nothing against South Carolina and Ray Tanner and Kent Reichert and their staff there. They did a tremendous job. It just could have been avoided, and the NCAA could have done something to have gotten those two teams. One of those two teams could have hosted, and it would have been a great atmosphere in Charlottesville, and it would have been an unbelievable atmosphere at Dallas Baptist because I don't think they've ever hosted a super regional, and it would have been a crazy environment for those kids and that little campus area where they are. That would have been a big deal for them.
Yeah, and Founders Park is a beautiful park. I've been there. It's just tremendous, but it's just not the same, and I don't know what else we can say. Barry, we got a lot of stuff to talk about later in the week, so I want to leave some things to get to later, but do you have any closing thoughts today as we end this episode?
Well, just a couple of little newsy items that we've, we hadn't had a chance to get on. Alabama and Jerry Zuley, their hitting coach, parted ways this weekend. And very quickly, Jerry Zuley was replaced by Matt Rada, who was at Pittsburgh this year, previously worked as a volunteer coach at Alabama under Brad Bohannon and actually played at Kentucky for Bohannon when he was an assistant at Kentucky, recruited him there. He's also been an assistant at Indiana and Xavier. So he has taken over hitting duties and assistant coach duties for Alabama for Jerry Zuley, who was they mutually agreed to part ways last week with him and Alabama. Just some clean up some stuff at Texas A&M, just some things. Read some things where, the new coach Jim Schlossnagle is in. They're looking and talking about expanding Bluebell Park. They feel like they have the room and the facilities and the money to do that. Maybe to go upwards of 10 to 12,000 people in their park, and this park's not that old. So there, some issues there, trying to maybe make that better. I think it's pretty good right now, but they're trying to make that better and understand that the cash flow is not going to be an issue when Jim Schlossnagle goes to hire a staff. Understand that he's going to have quite a bit of leeway to go out and find some guys. One guy that I've heard might be someone for him, and it may take another week or two to get this done because they're still playing. But Jake Gautreaux is a Texas native. He played for Schloss at Tulane, and I think they have a really good relationship. I think that may be something that would be of interest to both parties. I know Gautreaux's had some opportunities to leave Mississippi State in the past and hasn't done that yet, but he hasn't been offered a position. He hasn't been offered a position that I'm aware of right now. But if he is, that's his old coach, and they have a lot of respect for one another. And that'd be something to keep an eye on as Mississippi State's season winds down in the College World Series and see where that goes there. And then our old friend Gary Henderson, who was the head coach at Kentucky and the head coach at Mississippi State, took Mississippi State to the World Series a couple of years ago. He has resurfaced, and he is now the head coach at Utah in the Pac-12. And Gary's a tremendous person and a tremendous man, and really glad to see him back on the field as a head baseball coach at a Division I school. So it was a good hire by Utah last week. Getting him in the mix, and hopefully he'll be able to turn the Utes around a little bit and have a little bit more competitive team in Salt Lake City in the Pac-12 in the future. But just a few little nuggets that we kind of slipped by us the last few days because we've been so focused on the super regionals and teams going to Omaha, but just try to catch fans up on some other happenings in college baseball because other things are still going. This is, the hot time of the year for transfers, and a lot of teams are picking up transfers and teams going in the transfer portals. That's ridiculous. How many kids are in the baseball transfer portal? And just trying to keep everybody updated with what's going on because there's a lot of off the field stuff going on as well as stuff going on the field with the College World Series.
Well, and by the way, there is a vacancy in Baton Rouge, but I say we leave that for tomorrow because I'll be interested to see what happens in the next 24 hours with that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're in a tremendous hurry there. We talked about that last week. They had Pat Casey was on the list, and now he's not, and Kevin O'Sullivan was on the list, so they said, and now he's not. Chris Burke talked about Sunday in the LSU game. David Pierce at Texas was probably not their first, second, or third choice either. And sometimes you don't always get, that first guy or that second guy. And that's not always a bad thing. I tell everybody, second or third is not always the worst thing to be at some point because Nick Saban was not Alabama's first choice. They actually had Rich Rodriguez in the bag, and something happened with, I think it leaked out what Alabama was going to pay him, and West Virginia found out what they were going to pay him, and the AD was like, well, I can do that. And we're building this facility, and the next thing you know, Rich Rod is signing a new deal with West Virginia, and then Alabama no longer has Rich Rod, and then they're like, well, let's just wait and see how the Dolphins finish up, and let's just put our eggs in this basket. And I think for Alabama, that worked out pretty well in football. I don't think they'd be where they were if Rich Rod had come in 2007, but sometimes you just have to be patient and get the right guy. Mike Bianco's on that list. Cliff Godwin's on that list. And Corbin is on that list. There are guys out there that, be a lot of interest in the LSU job, and it's a high profile job, and it'll be a moneymaker for somebody, and it may help people get better contracts at other schools, but they'll get their guy, and they'll get a good, and it'd be interesting to see how that plays out over the next few days and weeks as the college baseball season comes to an end.
Well, the podcast will come to an end for today, but we will have 3 more later in the week. Anyway, for Barry Allen, I'm the host, Chris Lee. Thank you for listening today. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to these wherever you can find them. Be sure and visit our site at southeastern14.com. You can also get the podcast there, and you can also get our content as we roll out previews of each team heading into Omaha. We'll also have some other things. Anyway, thank you for listening to the 14. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Southeastern14, or make that 14 Southeastern. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening. We will see you again on Wednesday.